What's up, Madridistas on YouTube? This is Kiyan Sobhani. What you're about to listen to is a segment from last night's Managing Madrid post-game podcast where Matt, Wiltse, and we broke down to its core Real Madrid's 4-1 win over Real Sociedad, what it meant for the PSG game, Carlo Ancelotti's post-game quotes, and a lot of discussion on Camavinga and what we thought about his performance and some other stuff peppered into today's clip. The full episode is much longer. It's about 2 hours, and it can be found in your podcast app. You can also just click on the link in the show notes. You can just search Managing Madrid on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. We always do record at least one podcast for free. The rest are exclusively over on patreon.com/Managing Madrid. We got a huge lineup over on patreon.com/Managing Madrid this week. Tuesday's a loan tracker. Wednesday, if you're a patron, you get a Zoom link. You join us on the post-game show for the PSG game. Those are really the big podcasts of the season. Those Champions League nights, and this one, obviously season on the line. It's going to be massive either way, whether we win or lose. It's going to be jam-packed podcast with a lot of people in the Zoom link. So if you want to be a part of that, that's over on patreon.com/Managing Madrid. You will get a Zoom link to that. And then on Thursday is the mailbag, the day after Real Madrid face PSG. Lucas Navarrete is attending that game as press for Managing Madrid. And the day after, he's going to be joining me on a mailbag, so you don't want to miss that either. Again, patreon.com/Managing Madrid. We also just added officially today, we're coming back to Toronto. That'll be the last stop on the World Tour. Toronto is the only city we've hit twice on this World Tour, and that will conclude the World Tour. It's the last weekend of May. If you need help booking your spot to DC next week, or Chicago in April, or Madrid for Classico weekend, we added that one as well recently. We got Mumbai in May, and then Toronto in May as well. So it's going to be really crazy, and after that, I'm taking a decent break, like a few months at least, because I'm burnt out. I'm basically in a different city in the world every weekend, time zones, and juggling podcasts and juggling articles and covering games at the Bernabeu. My mind is just all over the place. So I'm going to take a break for a couple of weeks after the Toronto one. But come out and see me, because we're not doing this again. And the only city we've gone back to is Toronto. Everywhere else, we're not kidding. We're not coming back. We're not coming back to your city. So DC, we're not coming back. This is your last chance. Chicago, we're not coming back. This is your last chance. Mumbai, we're not coming back because it's an insane trip to go to India. Delhi, we might do in the future, but Mumbai, we're not coming back. And Toronto, hey, we're coming back. Toronto is pretty close to home to me, so it's a little bit easier for me. But Toronto is also one of our biggest markets. So if you want early bird tickets to that, they're up now. If you need help booking your spot to any of these cities, just comment and I will help you out. Don't sweat it. Enjoy today's clip, and don't forget to subscribe on Patreon immediately. Enjoy. The XG chart is remarkable. I don't think I've ever seen that. I don't think I've ever seen just XG of 0.74 and it comes from a penalty and that's it. The only shot is a penalty. This was also reminded to us on the broadcast on the ESPN feed a couple times. You know, we've known this. Ancelotti himself spoke about it in, I think, a pregame presser or one of the pressers that, like, hey, I know we haven't been fun to watch lately, but we also haven't conceded a goal, like, in the last 4 games. So the defense at least has held up, but part of me is like, you know, knows just based on football history and experience as a football fan, and maybe you know this as well, Matt, or maybe you see it differently. I don't know, but I kind of know deep down it means little. PSG lost tonight as well in the 88th minute. They conceded a goal and lost 1-0 to Nice, and I can just almost safely say that the form doesn't matter so much. PSG's form for sure doesn't matter to me, because I don't care if they lose to Nice. I don't care if they lose to El Salvador. It doesn't matter, because I know that they're just going to play and elevate their game completely at the Bernabeu, just like they did in the first leg. So I don't really care what PSG does. If they're bad right now in their league games, in the last 3 games, a lot of people have mentioned that. It doesn't matter to me. And I also, like, to your point about Real Sociedad, maybe this is the worst game of the season. Those who've been listening to Churros y Tácticas podcast know that I've been pretty critical of Real Sociedad all season. They haven't looked good. They haven't been nearly as good as their early season results would suggest, and certainly haven't been as good as they were at the beginning of last season. Usually, like, what happens with them is they start off well and they kind of taper off. They don't have the depth to sustain it, but really, like, I haven't been impressed with them from the beginning this season. So that aside, I also want to say, from a Real Madrid perspective, I think this matters a lot. And again, maybe it doesn't mean we're going to beat PSG, but in terms of ticking off the right boxes, we tick them all. I messaged you and Oman Slack almost nervously saying, like, I'm kind of worried that the young players are going to play this game, and I was thinking of Camavinga mostly at the top of the list of, like, he's going to play because he has to. There's going to be, midfielders out of this game, Fede and Cruz. He's going to maybe play out of position, and then, or he's going to play in his ideal position and not play well because he doesn't have rhythm, and then all of a sudden the narrative writes itself. There's a reason why Carlo wasn't trusting him and wasn't rotating these other positions. But we ticked off all the right boxes. Camavinga played central midfielder and played well. Modric was subbed early after having a really good game and a bunch of outside the boot passes, and maybe he wasn't perfect, which we can get to, but he also scored an absolute cracker of a goal. Benzema's confidence sky high right now. Vinicius, not a fantastic game, but you can see his moments of brilliance throughout. Rodrigo, a really good game. So maybe he features from the start. Asensio, a goal right away off the bench, which is something, we've been calling for him to come off the bench. I don't know if he does, but these are all like good signs to me. I thought we ticked off a lot of the boxes. And last but not least, we pressed high, which Ancelotti praised in the press conference. And we won the ball back numerous times. We had more control, we had more possession, and it was just more fun to watch. So, Matt, what does this all mean for the PSG game? Is it just us? Is it just me being dramatic? Should I dial it back a little bit? You want to set me straight? How do you feel about this?
I think I like this type of performance before the PSG game. I like building the positive momentum. You build the positive feelings with the Santiago Bernabeu as well. I think that's really important. The energy at the stadium today. After, like, at first you were worried when the team goes down a goal after the PK, and just felt like we weren't really creating any opportunities until the Camavinga goal opened things up for us. And then after that, obviously Benzema quickly scores, but it gets disallowed. Then Modric scores 3 minutes later, and so the Santiago Bernabeu really got into it, and the energy came a lot. I think that connection with the stadium and that relationship is going to be fundamental for the game on Wednesday. And we all know how important the Santiago Bernabeu can be on European nights. And so I think getting those engines warm and getting that connection going was really important. So I like the feel of this. I'm trying not to get too hyped and too excited, but I think it was the right direction. And then I know we don't think, like, we really don't think much of PSG's results in Ligue 1, but I at least think it's going to put some doubts in their head, or it's going to make them think, like, maybe there was a few disagreements in the locker room after the loss, or heads were down, whatever it may be. They may take that energy into the midweek. And so I think in terms of how this could have rolled out ahead of that match, I think it was the best case scenario for us.
Well, on that note, you're talking about doubt and Bernabeu fans and stuff. I just retweeted a tweet from Phil Kittro that I saw, and he had posted a Mikel Merino quote, and the quote is this after the game. He says, quote, "It's so tough. They start to believe in themselves. You just start to doubt yourself." And he's talking about the Bernabeu crowd and what it's like to play through that. Like, just mentioning that at some point there's a flip, there's a switch that gets flipped, and all of a sudden you're just like, wow, they got so much momentum right now. I felt it not so much during the Camavinga goal, which was crazy, but the way the Modric goal went down, I really felt a switch there, right there. And maybe if you want, you can trace it further back. You can trace it back to Benzema's disallowed goal, which I think is absolutely absurd that it was disallowed, again, unless I'm missing a weird replay. I mentioned this to Om on the Twitter Spaces at halftime, that, like, maybe VAR has a secret replay where they have, like, Benzema's balls offside or something. Like, I did not see it. But when Modric scores, the way he celebrated and ran to the crowd, I felt like was a huge moment, because the goal was amazing, but the way he celebrated also and got the fans involved also hyped up the whole thing. And then you have the intangibles and some of the variables that could happen on Wednesday, like Vinicius pumping up the crowd at the corner flag. He loves doing that, and this intangible thing of doubt that you mentioned also, that, like, we score an early goal, maybe crowd starts chanting some stuff, and get involved. Like, though we do know that there are historically, like, second legs can be wildly different from the first leg, how they went down. And if you want the PSG parallel to this, that's not in the group stages, but think about, like, you know, that game in Paris where we lost 3-0. It looked like men amongst boys. We were just absolutely getting demolished. And then the return group stage game at the Bernabeu was one where we just toyed with them and somehow drew 2-2, and that's the Hazard famous injury one. But we've had also just moments against PSG also in the knockout stages where first half we get, you know, we don't play well, they play better. In the second half, we blow them away, you know, we make some tweaks. All that's on the table, but I know we want to talk about some of the nitty-gritty of this game, Matt. I also wanted to ask you a couple things about Carlo Ancelotti's post-game quotes. At this point, I don't tweet out his whole press conference, but I just tweet out some of the stuff that is kind of interesting to me personally. And when he was talking about Camavinga, he said, you know, a lot of praise for Camavinga. You know, talked about all of his good qualities, his athleticism, his energy levels, the energy that he brings, all that stuff. He also said, quote, he feels more comfortable next to Casemiro, which I thought was a good sign for all of us who are on the propaganda train of Camavinga must be a central midfielder. The fact that Ancelotti said he feels more comfortable next to Casemiro, which is a good thing, because in that case, it could be a double pivot or it could be Casemiro behind him. But he also said that his place in the 11 is not guaranteed against Paris. You know, it depends. Will Kroos be healthy? How will Fede recover from his flu-like symptoms? That's one. The second thing that I want to ask you about is the press, because Carlo did say the plan from the beginning was to press high against Real Sociedad. And I wanted that because I mentioned that to at halftime. I was like, I kind of do wonder what would have happened in this game if Real Sociedad didn't score early. Like, would we still be as fun to watch and forced to come out of our shell? And I feel like Carlo kind of answered that in the press conference by saying the plan was to press high from the beginning and not let them escape. And then he said, if we play like this on Wednesday, we have a good chance. He didn't necessarily come out and say if we press like we did today. He just said if we play like we did today. I don't know what that means, because he also said something else that to me was a bit paradoxical, in that he said our plan won't change based on who's available, because he was asked, like, you know, will that change if Kroos plays or not? So do you think that we would press high even with like Kroos and Modric in midfield on Wednesday? Or do you think we will play more conservative than what we saw today?
I think judging by Ancelotti's quotes today, and if you think back to his quotes after the PSG game, it sounded like he recognized that there needed to be a change. And I think we would, even if it was just Kroos, Modric, and Casemiro in midfield, I think we would press. And I hope that we do get to still see Camavinga in the lineup against PSG on Wednesday. I think given the absentees, I don't feel comfortable. If Kroos is only 80%, like, do you risk him? I don't know. I think if he's going to be playing that anchor role, you don't want a guy that has a 75% fit hamstring. Like, I agree. If he can't run, if he can't run properly, then that's not the position that you want Kroos to be sitting deep in. And if we're going to be pressing, like, even more so. So I think, like, look at Camavinga's heat map from this game. He was literally everywhere. He was everywhere. He gets I do think, I mean, we've talked about it so much, and I tweeted it out that, like, we finally get reap some rewards from all our commentary on just pleading with Carlo to play Camavinga in a number 8 role next to a Casemiro, or just higher up. It doesn't necessarily have to be next to Casemiro, but you saw today kind of what that freedom did, and it allowed him to, in this high pressing scheme, he's just so good at getting his long legs around the opponent and winning the ball back and winning headers in midfield, picking up the second ball. It's those small, dirty work details that sometimes go unnoticed that he would just excelled at today. And I think Modric, and Casemiro were just fantastic. Like, I loved it today. I thought they were all really, really good. They won every single battle. Like, Real Sociedad couldn't compete. And so, I think to circle back to your initial question, I do think we will go with that press on Wednesday, and I'm looking forward to it. I hope it's not going to be nearly as easy as it was today against Real Sociedad, because PSG have guys like Verratti who are probably amongst the most press resistant players in the world, Neymar as well. So it's not going to be nearly as easy, but I think I'd rather go out guns blazing than playing the way we did in the first leg.
So you brought up a lot of interesting things. Let's table the discussion about the press for a second. We'll come back to it. But let's start with Camavinga's performance, because to me, in terms of just things that I found really interesting in this game, was just Camavinga from start to finish. And I promise I'm not saying that because of his goal. I have the most notes on him, and maybe that's because that's kind of where my brain just was, because I mentioned this to you on Omen Slack. I have to confess tonight that I think I'm in love with the kid. If you have Jovic and Om has Vinicius, I think Camavinga is my guy moving forward. I'm just rooting so badly for him to succeed. I'm almost tearing up just talking about it. I love him so much. So I was just tracking him and seeing how he was doing. And I thought the goal was obviously great. It's not it was great for our agenda of him playing center midfield, but obviously wasn't really. It's kind of neither here nor there. But I will say, it was a symptom of him playing in a higher role because you see him floating around the top of the box a lot. And what I noticed about Camavinga in this game is that, it felt like he was a little bit more unshackled and unchained than if you just stick him in the anchor role, especially in a game like this where you're having a lot of the ball in the final third. He's swapping positions. There was, in the fourth minute, there was this, and I was kind of interested that he played on the right center midfielder and Modric went left. I'm curious to know what you think of that. But he was also kind of roaming around. While he was more of a right CM, as early as this fourth minute, he did the thing where Mendy did the inverted left back role, goes up to this left center forward position. Camavinga drops and covers for him, and they're just changing positions. And then a few minutes later, he's on the right flank, linking up with Carvajal and Rodrigo on the right. Then he comes over to the left in the second half a little bit, combines with Vinicius and Mendy. His ball winning in midfield was great. He also just has this presence at the top of the box, where the opponent's zone 14 is. He's there if the ball comes. If the ball is cleared, he's there. He counter-pressed and won the ball there. There was this one sequence where he was fouled right in that area, which led to an Alaba free kick. His dribbling was good. His defensive reads were pretty good. I mean, there were a couple things, he wasn't perfect, but, there was a couple times maybe where he ran into trouble and lost the ball when he was double-teamed. I thought there was on one occasion in the first half, he had a little bit of a poor communication with Rodrigo defensively, and the structure kind of just melted, and Real Sociedad broke free. It was in the 19th minute. That was rare, though. I thought it was a really good Camavinga performance. So I'm curious to know what you thought of his role, and were you also surprised that maybe he went more to the right and Modric was to the left?
That piece maybe didn't surprise me that much, just because maybe Carlo wanted him cutting in on his left foot. But to your point, he was, and to the point I made earlier about the heat map, he literally was everywhere. And when you were talking about all those different sequences, my mind even went to moments where he was overlapping Vinicius on the left wing and getting himself isolated 1v1 spots and high up the left side of the pitch. He just popped up everywhere. And I like him in this advanced role for a number of reasons, but another one of those reasons is because if he loses the ball, let's say he has a heavy touch, or if he loses it in that area of the pitch, the consequences won't be as dire as they would be if he loses the pitch or decides to dribble up the pitch 20 yards from our goal. And so you just have more, he has more freedom to express himself and to kind of get away with mistakes. You're not going to be, the consequences won't be as bad if you make a mistake higher up the pitch. And the way we were just counter pressing and all over the ball, if we lost possession today, we quickly recovered and just went right back at Real Sociedad. So I think this was a great game for Camavinga, and I think it was the perfect game ahead of this PSG match. Like we talked about, the energy from the Santiago Bernabeu. We talked about the press, like we talked about like all these things, kind of feel good performance and these little ingredients coming together ahead of the midweek. I think Camavinga is another piece, and the fact that he had a good performance today will only help him because I think he needed that confidence boosting performance. He needed a game where he felt like he came out of the Santiago Bernabeu, played the full game, and just was one of the best players on the pitch and scored a golazo. And it was just everything came together for him today, and I'm happy for him because if he does have to have the responsibility of playing in the PSG game, which I hope he does, then this game will be a huge confidence booster for him.